Hey, it's great to be back here again. It's Friday, and let's quickly get right down to our lesson. This week on Sunday, we had an amazing event. We actually went to the northern part of Shomron, the ancient capital called Sebastia. Of course, it's called Shomron, the ancient city of Shomron, where the house of Israel sat, the kings of ancient kings. If you look in the book of Kings, you'll find that that was the capital, where kings like Achav and kings of Israel, although many of them were evil, most of them, that was where they had the capital. We all read about it, and it was amazing to actually be there. Unfortunately, the Jews have been thrown out of their homes back in 2006 in that area, but now, slowly but surely, we're trying to again take hold of our holy land and return to those places we were thrown out of in 2006, like in Gaza as well. But it was an amazing thing, and I'd like to pay tribute to that actual place I was in the northern part of Shomron by opening up this Torah with something that has to do with Shomron, Samaria. And how do we do that? If you look in the book of Hosea, Hosea is one of the 12 prophets, the little ones, and if you look in the first chapter, where God again tells him to go take a harlot as a wife, etc. If you look at verse number 4, which I'd like to actually read it, and that's going to be the opening of our topic, we see something very, very interesting in verse 4. And what does verse 4 say? It says like this, Vayomer Hashem elav kra shmo Yisrael, which means Hosea has a son, and God says to him, call him Yisrael, ki od mat, very, very soon, ufakadati et mei Yisrael, I will remember. The blood of Israel, not again Israel with an S, or Jezreel in English, I don't know how it's saying in English, Yisrael, on the house of Yehu ben Nimshi was one of the kings of Israel, Vishbati mamlechut be'Yisrael, I will again cut off the house, the kingship, the kingdom of Israel. And this is what God is telling the prophet of Hosea. Now what happened? Why is God remembering what Yehu, this king Yehu did? Who was Yehu? What did he do exactly? And it's something that seems very, very difficult when we actually go see what Yehu did, and we're going to actually, in a minute, understand what I'm talking about. So first, if we look at Rashi, Rashi really helps us right away. And Rashi says, it's talking about the fact that Yehu killed the house of Achav. If you all know the story, I'm going to quickly bring us there. Let's quickly run to Kings chapter 10, Kings 2, chapter 10. There are two books of Kings, right? The second book, chapter 10. If we look at the beginning in verse 18, it opens like this. Vayikbotz Yehu et kol ha'am, and he gathers the entire nation. Vayomer aleim, and says to them, Achav avadet habal me'at, Yehu yavdenu habe. Which means, Achav, King Achav, the evil Achav, he worshipped the Baal, the idols, the Baal, a little bit. I'm going to do a lot, Yehu says. And of course, we know that he was doing this as we say in Hebrew, a talgil, some kind of ploy to gather all these prophets, these false prophets, and these idol worshippers in one room and knock them all out. That's what he actually does. If we look further down, we see what happens there. They all get into this place, and then it says, they would see with Masavot Beit Abal, Vesrifu, and they take out all these idol worship things and they burn them down. And of course, he kills all those idol worshippers. And then it says in verse 28, Vayashmei Yehu et Baal Yisrael, and he completely wiped out the Baal from Israel. He got them all there, knocked them all out. And what does God say in verse number 30? Vayomer Hashem El Yehu, God says to Yehu, wow, Yana sherativota lasot hayashar be'enai, because you did the good thing in my eyes, everything that was in my heart, asita leveit achav b'nei asita, which means everything. You did everything that I wanted you to do. And he says, therefore, he says, b'nei revi'im yeshvu lechal kisei Yisrael. He promises him to have 4 kings will come out of his loins, from his seed. He will have 4 kings, which means he's getting rewarded for this amazing act of zealous, you want to call it, connecting to this week's portion, by wiping out these idol worshippers. So we see over here in Kings, again, Kings 2, 2 Kings, chapter 10, we see that Yehu did he did an amazing act. And God is praising him for that act. But what is really very, very difficult, we go back to Hosea. Again, the first chapter, verse 4, we see that God is now remembering what he did. He killed, as Rashi explains, according to Rashi's explanation, that he wiped out all these prophets in the whole house of Achav. He's now being punished for this. So why? Why is he being punished for? God was so happy he did it. good question, right? Well, Rashi on the spot goes a little further to answer the question. Let's see what Rashi says. Here's an amazing answer. Rashi says like this. Rashi says, let me get back to the place here we are. Rashi says like this. He says, Al shavdu et habal v'alchuhu uvanav acharechem. What happens after he goes ahead and wipes out Achav for worshipping idols? Him and his sons go ahead and do the same thing themselves. V'avdu avodat kochavim. They themselves worship idols. L'chach ani choshev aleim demei beit Achav kidam lakim. Therefore, I consider this blood as innocent blood, because you yourself did not live to your preaching. I therefore consider this innocent blood. And that's so. It wasn't for nothing that now Hoshea was again being told by Hashem that he's now going to be punished for what he did, because Yehu did not live up to his preaching. And that's a very difficult thing to say, and I'll tell you why. Because if you look in the Talmud, in the Tractate of Sanhedrin, it's really the question. This concept even gets stronger, because we see that Yehu he ended up worshiping idols because of mistake. And why? Yeravam, the evil Yeravam, as we all know, who didn't want the Jewish people to go up to worship Hashem in Jerusalem, he sets up in Bet-El again idols for them to worship, golden idols to worship there in Bet-El. And how did he convince everyone? The Talmud tells a story in Sanhedrin how he convinced everyone to fall into that trap. He put down, he got evil people to sit with the righteous people, and they started saying, they asked the rabbis, whatever a king says you got to do. So they said, of course. Well, also worshiping idols, and the rabbi said, of course not. What do you mean? They're going to say to worship idols? You can't do something like that. She goes, of course. So what happened was, Yeravam prepared some kind of document, right? And he had this document written down, and he said, of course, and one of the parts of the document said, the king is saying you must worship idols, worship these idols in Bet-El. So, of course, the rabbi said, we can't sign something like this. This is evil. So the evil people convinced the rabbis to sign. Why? They said, listen, he's just doing this to try to show that our loyalty to him. But of course, he's the furthest thing from idol worship, whatever it was. And one of the prophets, a rabbi signed, great rabbis at the time, and one of the great prophets, Achiyah Shiloni, signed that letter. And when Yehu sees this letter, he himself said, wow, people like this signed this letter? And he was taken in, he actually worshipped the idols, him and his sons in Bet-El. This is what the Talmud says. So it really wasn't 100%, of course. He wasn't at fault, according to his Talmudic explanation. He wasn't at fault. So why did God punish him so severely by punishing him later on for that blood of Achav, that he followed God's word? And the answer is, we see how important it is, even if you do something, right? And even you mistakenly, but you did the same, you fell into the same trap that you preached against, and you did that same thing that you said it was wrong to do, you're held accountable for that. And this, again, my friends, is an opening to this week's portion, Pinchas. What it means to be zealous. When a person, again, zealousy is something which, on the most part, is a very, very bad thing, as we know. When it leads to acting violent, etc. Actually killing, what happened in this week's portion. And today, where do we see zealousy today? If you want to see zealousy or madmen today, you go around and you look around and look at what's going on in the world. All the terrible terrorism all over the place of what's going on in the Middle East, and in Syria and in Iraq, and just giving a couple of small examples, but all over the world is this Islamic terrorism which is going on. It's from zealousy, people believing in the name of Allah, they're going ahead and killing people. This is the way they're talking, and they seem to be, a lot of Pinchas is around, going around doing things like that. So how do we know? Wait a second, look what's going on. They're going ahead and killing, and how do we know these zealous acts? They're saying they're doing the name of their God, and they're doing it for important reasons. How do we know there's something wrong and evil within what they're doing? This concept is exactly what we just spoke about, we just taught now. That you have to practice what you preach. You have to live. A zealous act can only be justified when it's 100% pure, with not one bit of, I'm doing it 75% for zealousy, 25% for my own personal thing. When your own personal thing is in there, and not for an act of 100% love. It's Zealousy really has to stem from love and not from hatred. When you know that this act stems from hatred, which is a personal fight you have with someone, a personal thing you want to settle with somebody, right? That comes from hatred. That is not zealous, that's evilness. That's an important thing to distinguish. If you see throughout the Torah and throughout history, true zealous acts that were true righteous zealous acts, we can it's hard to even think about where we find them. They don't exist, because to act in such a harsh way of judgment, he had to go out and kill these two people that were doing something very, very evil, right? Immoral in the tent. But to do something like that, to take the law into your own hands and go out and act zealous, is something that, if you ask the rabbis, you ask the Jewish courts, can you do something? They're going to answer you, no, you're not allowed to do that. Only if it happens as a spontaneous act of true, pure love for God, and the time you already asked the question is too late already, means you're not zealous, then it doesn't mean it. Obviously, it doesn't exist. It's a make-up. It's not real. It's a false zealousy, which is poison and dangerous. And that's what, of course, all these evil people in the world killing people from jealousy is coming from the wrong reasons and all from the dark side, and it's a nightmare. It's destroying this world, and we have to, of course, fight against that. Let's put that aside now. That's not our topic for today. Our topic today is to understand that when a person does something, he has to be motivated for purity, and without any personal gain within his motivation, in order for it to be pure, and then he can act like Pinchas. Otherwise, forget about it. That's 99.999. There's no one around like Pinchas today. And that's why, of course, the one who can actually go along and testify that what he did was a righteous act, God himself, who rewards Pinchas with an everlasting priesthood. The covenant of peace was given to a man that seemed to make war, right? Obviously, we know this can't be. But God is already telling that this was the most amazing act of true love for God. He gave himself completely. Of course, he endangered himself because he could have been killed himself. He endangered himself to do something that he believed in because his love of God, 100% love. And that's something, again, rare, but we have to take it to ourselves as a lesson. Not to go out and running around as zealous crazies, but to learn to practice what we preach. We go ahead and we say something, and we try to say something to a friend or a child or a spouse, and we ourselves do not live that. How can we go and reprove them or tell them something that we ourselves don't believe in? It's worth nothing. And a child will see this right away. If you grow up in a home and a father is always telling the child, do not lie, do not this, and he himself, they catch him lying, they catch him doing this, they'll have no respect for the father. Because they realize that it's just all, that he doesn't really live what he's saying. And of course, the husband doesn't respect his wife, and he goes ahead or gets angry about something that he himself does. Then what's going on over here? He's not living what he's saying. We have to realize that this is one of the hardest things of life, is to practice what we preach. And to be very careful, be very, very sensitive and delicate. Before you go ahead and do something and say something to somebody, make sure you know 100% that you live by this rule. And we know there's a famous Talmud passage that talks about Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva says, I am very doubtful if we have someone in my generation who knows how to reprove someone, to give someone really musar, as we say. I mean, to giving someone musar, telling someone ethics, teaching him ethics, and trying to reprove him, is something that requires, again, a tremendous development, spiritual development of a human being, a person, in order to go out and being able to find fault in somebody and try to give him reproof. That's a hard thing to do. And why? It's a beautiful Torah in Rav Nachman ben Breslau. And he's saying when a person gives someone such reproof, if he does it the wrong way, it's like taking something that smells very bad and releasing it. And it's going to instead of isolating that bad smell, you're going to actually release it and cause the smell to spread out. And what does he mean by that? When someone has a certain quality that has to be rectified, and you go out and you're doing it the wrong way, instead of rectifying him, but you're belittling that person and you're doing it the wrong way, you're causing a blockage with his connection to God. You're causing the world to suffer the fact that he has a soul that is now not connected with God, because you're pushing him further away instead of bringing him closer. But if your reproof comes from love, if Pure proof comes from a true a point that you yourself, of course, rectified yourself, and you're creating a good smell, because you're actually showing this person that doesn't belong to him. These bad actions that he's doing are not part of him, but it's something that's outside of him, and you're showing how in the inside is really pure and special, that person, that individual. And that way you can really rectify that person. You're creating a beautiful aroma. And that, of course, can rectify the world and open up the channels in the world. And that's what one of the great lessons here of this week's portion is, to understand, again, to practice what you preach. By learning from this zealous act, one zealous act, we have to learn again that most of the time we have to live our lives of the opposite, of not being zealous. Thinking very carefully what we do. Reflection. Going inside. Acting, again, only when we know that we ourselves live by that 100%. And that's the lesson here. One of the lessons of this week's portion. I want you to have a wonderful Shabbat. I miss you all. Let's have, again, a beautiful, beautiful Shabbat. And let's pray. Very soon we will see amazing, amazing wonders in the land of Israel, which will bring rectification for the entire world. Shabbat Shalom. Besorot Tovot. Yeshuot Benechamot.